In this lesson, we're going to be going over the differences between public scope, private scope, and protected scope. So in the last lesson, we looked at public scope and we're looking at the defaults and how public scope uses the methods and properties that are available within that class and is able to return them and use them within any instances of the object. So there's also private scope. So that means when you want to access this information here, any of the properties or methods that are available within that class, this private is going to mean that it's only accessible from within this class. So we're going to be showing you an example of that as well. And protected scope, when you want to make your method or property visible to all classes that extend your class, including the parent class. So that allows you to use that information between extended classes that are only included within the parent class. So you're not going to be having the same functionality as you would with public, but you're not going to be as restricted as you are with private, and you're going to be coming in somewhere in the middle, having access to protected properties and methods that are available within that parent class. So essentially, public and private are going to be fairly easy to demonstrate, where we've got it right now set to public, and when we do change this to private, and just show you what happens when that when we do make that change, that we do get a fatal error, and it says that the private property car blue cannot access the private property. So we've been able to restrict that access to this information just by changing it public. But we are actually able to use this within the class itself. A few updates to the code, and we've got a private property there with a value of 452, and now we've set a public function, and we're accessing that public function or public method through this object, accessing my engine, and it's actually accessing the same property here, the engine size value, but because it's actually within the class itself, it's able to access it by this and return the value that's set within this private property. So because this is public and this one has access to all the private information within this object, we're able to return that value even though it is private. So there's an example of how you can access private information publicly and use that as in the output. But if you did want just access to this, and you might want to just set that to public to simplify things. Here we've updated the code to show you an example of how protected works. So we've added in a new property there. We're calling it protected new engine size, and we actually have access to this when we're using the function within this function. So when we do use that over here, we can see that we do get access to it, and we're going to output that new engine size of 500 just from that value there. So what's happening in that example is we've created the object, we're accessing the method within the object, and because it's protected, or we could access the private one or the public one, we have full access to all the properties that are being set within this class, and what we're doing is we're just returning that protected property. So it works the same way within the class, but the difference is when you are working with protected is when you're extending a class. So here we've done a quick extension of this class, the car blueprint class. We've just called it another car. We've set up a brand new class, a brand new object here, calling it new another car, and we've assigned a value of object A, and here we're outputting object A, and we're calling this method that's available within the new object. So it essentially has access to the information from car blueprint as well as another car classes. And when we do myEngineB method, it looks through here, it doesn't see it, and then it looks through here and it says, okay, well, there's that method. We're returning this property, and as you can see, it's not available, it's not set up within this class, but because this class is extending the previous class, we do have access to that protected information. If we were to try to return back a private scope, we can see that we don't have access to it. So we can only access the protected scope that's within that extended class, and from this object we can actually access that original public method as well if we needed to. So we have full access to everything when we're using protected, public, and private in that manner. So we're going to get more into what extends does in another lesson, in an upcoming lesson, but this lesson was primarily to cover off the differences between public, protected, and private, and within this illustration we're able to do that and show all the differences between the different scopes that are available within classes. And it's important when you're deciding what scope you're going to use within that class to look at it and say, what are you going to be using it for? If you need to reuse it in extended classes, then go protected. If you want to have full access to it, then you can just do public, or if you want to have limited access to it only within that particular class. So if we want to have another private one that was only available within this one and we were extending it again, so we would just have to work out the logic when we're creating these classes about what's going to be private, protected, and what's going to be public. And we're going to work more with these in the upcoming lessons as well. So this was just an introduction to public, private, and protected.